Thank you, Catherine. Joining us now is prominent businessman Jimnah Mbaru, who contested on a TNA ticket for the governorship, for the nomination for governorship of Nairobi. Thank you so much for joining us. You're one of those who is disgruntled by the process. In fact, you're moving to court. Tell us why.
Yes, I'd like to take this opportunity to inform my supporters, the members of the public, the Kenyans, and everyone in the country that I have today launched an appeal against the TNA's decision to grant the certificate, nomination certificate to my former colleague, my competitor, Ferdinand Waititu. I've launched this appeal against this decision for three reasons. Firstly, I think this nomination was marred with a lot of violence, chaos, and malpractices. First of all, it they did not take place on Thursday as scheduled, but it took one day after. During that period, everybody knew who are the agents, where were the polling stations going to be located, and when you have that type of a situation, you are bound to have unfair practices. But I think more importantly is the chaos and violence which took places in some of the polling centers. We have Korogosho, where we had a lot of problems. We had Dora also. In some areas in Isri, we had a lot of problems. In Kamukonji, we had a lot of problems. I think even in St. Peter's Cravers, there were a lot of problems. And
you think it affected the turnout of your
it affected
supporters?
We found that most of this violence took places where I had the greatest support. And I realized that particularly in the whole of Embakasi, I had enormous support. In some of these areas, that is where we had a lot of violence. I also want to say that not all polling stations were closed at the same time. Whereas some were closed at 3 o'clock, others were closed very late at night, around 10 o'clock. So in areas where I had very, very strong support, those stations were closed very, very early, around 3, 4. But in other areas, the closing time was far much late, and not as I scheduled.
All right. I will move away from that because now that matter will be one that will be determined by the courts. But I want to focus on what some of your critics have said. And they said you carried out a very elitist campaign, that you weren't really ready to get your hands dirty and go to the ground where the majority of Kenyan voters are, the poor, the disenfranchised. What do you have to say to that?
I think I've had that complaint before, and it's not true. I have been to the ground. I toured the whole of Mathare Valley. I toured the whole of Embakasi. I toured the Dagoretti areas. I've gone to the slums areas. I've talked to the various people in Mukuru, and I've been to all these places. I think that is an accusation which has been brought up by many of my competitors, and they try to portray me as an elitist, somebody who does not have access to the ordinary people, and who is not prepared to,
Or someone whose policies are very complicated, that you're not really breaking it down to the average Kenyan to understand how you intend to make this economy grow in their pocket.
I think the most important thing is to understand that when we talk about building the economy, you must look at the practical things of what you need to do. When we talk about 24-hour economy, it means every business person, every business lady, mama, boga, and I can, trade, for 24 hours. You can get more people working on 24 hours. That is how you put money into people's pockets. When you talk about, building houses, it means that, if we are paying rent twice, now if there are many houses in the marketplace, you probably pay less. This is what we are talking about. We're talking about building market. It means people must go into the marketplace and buy and sell. That is how you put money into people's pockets. I don't think you can really pick money from anywhere and put people in people's pockets. That situation does not arise. What is important is to build an economy, a vibrant economy, where anybody can get a job, where anybody can trade, and where even big businesses can also survive.
Do you intend, I know you're of course appealing this decision, and that hints on the fact that you somewhat intend to stay engaged in politics. Should this appeal fail, do you think, one, you will remain in politics, and number two, will you remain in TNA, and three, do you think at all there is a way you will be willing to work with Ferdinand Waititu, who of course the party has claimed was the rightfully chosen nominee?
Let me put it this way. The policies and my agenda now is in the public domain. And I think this is what needs to be implemented with passion, with commitment and determination. I've talked about, building Nairobi as Africa's business capital. I think that's an agenda which can be implemented and must be implemented. All what requires is commitment, passion, and look at the strategies which are required. I've talked about doubling the economy of Nairobi. Once again, this is something which is in the public domain. And I've talked about the strategies of, implementing, the 3 pillars. I've talked about security, and I've also talked about the problem and the solutions to those problems. I think I've talked about all the problems, and I've given solutions, practical solutions, which affect everybody, and everybody can see they are practical and realistic.
Finally, do you think the fallout in TNA is going to affect the way the party will perform come March 4th?
I don't know. I cannot answer that question at this particular moment in time. I think what is important is for a party to be able to, bring the people together, put their members together, advise them, show them the direction on how things will be in the future, so that this type of a situation does not arise. But I think more appropriate and importantly is that Nairobi needs to be managed well, needs to be understood well, needs leadership which sees very far, which has great vision. Of course, the voters determine that, but the important thing is that it is a very, very central institution, very central county in the affairs of this country, within the region, and also within the continent of Africa, to the extent that some of these policies we have been advocating must be implemented.
I'm sorry, I must cut you short. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll wait to hear what the courts will decide on your appeal.
Thank you very much.
Jimnah Mbaru speaking to us.